There is a side of Barry Gibb's story the world never really saw. Not the fame, not the lights, not the awards, but the boy who grew up singing with his brothers and the man who had to learn how to keep singing when they were gone. And there was one person outside of his family who quietly shaped how he understood fame, loyalty, and how to stay yourself in a world that changes you. For the first time, Barry speaks honestly about Cliff Richard, the man he admired, the man who never broke, and the man who showed him what it means to stay human in a life of fame. Before the fame, before the lights, before the falsetto that changed music forever, Barry Gibb was just a young boy, surrounded by songs, stories, and a dream that seemed impossible. Barry Gibb was born on the 1st of September, 1946, in Douglas, on the Isle of Man. His full name was Barry Allen Crompton Gibb. He was the second of 5 children in a family where music was a natural part of daily life. His parents, Hugh and Barbara Gibb, both loved music. Hugh had played drums and knew how performing worked, and Barbara enjoyed singing and encouraged creativity. Their home was a place where someone was always humming or singing. Music was not something distant or special. It was normal. It was simply part of how the family lived each day. Barry had 4 siblings who shaped his early world. His older sister was Leslie, and his younger brothers were the twins, Robin and Maurice. Later, the youngest brother, Andy, was born. In those early years, Barry and the twins discovered something important. They realized that when they sang together, their voices blended in a natural way. They could match tones and form harmonies even when they were still very young. They did not learn this from formal lessons. It came naturally through listening and copying what they heard. This early harmony between the brothers later became the core of the Bee Gees' famous sound. Life on the Isle of Man was simple. The family did not have wealth, but they had strong connections with each other. Barry spent time playing outside, exploring the streets, and listening to songs played at home. Even at that age, he was drawn to melody. He listened closely to how songs were built, how voices moved, and how emotion came through singing. Without knowing it, he was learning the skills that would guide his future career. When Barry was still a boy, the family moved to Manchester, England. This move changed their surroundings completely. Manchester was busier, louder, and more crowded. Life was harder, and the family had to work to make ends meet. But even with the challenges, music continued to be the heart of their home. Hugh worked to support the family, and Barbara held the household together. She encouraged the children to stay close, rely on each other, and keep singing. In Manchester, Barry began to understand that music was more than something he enjoyed. It felt like something he was meant to do. He did not see music as just a hobby. He felt pulled toward it. He wanted to sing and write songs. While other children played games or focused on schoolwork, Barry spent time practicing guitar and shaping melodies. Writing songs became natural to him. He began to feel that expressing emotion through music was something he could not ignore. Barry and his brothers practiced often. They listened to the radio and tried to copy the voices they heard. They stood close to each other, practicing harmonies until the blend sounded right. Barry learned how different notes fit together and how to bring emotion into a melody. He began to understand rhythm, timing, and how a song needed structure. These early moments became the roots of his songwriting ability. No one taught him through formal lessons. He learned by listening, feeling, and repeating. Life was not always easy in these years. The family sometimes struggled with money, and they moved houses more than once. But the closeness of the family and the music and they shared gave them comfort. When the outside world felt difficult, singing together made them feel strong. Music connected them, it held them together, and gave them a sense of purpose. These early experiences shaped Barry in a lasting way. The bond with his brothers, the encouragement from his parents, and the constant presence of music created a direction for his life. Even though he was just a child, It was already clear that music was becoming part of him. He was not simply playing or copying sounds, he was growing into a person who would one day write and perform songs that millions of people would remember. But destiny rarely waits patiently, and soon, a family decision would set Barry on a path far away from everything he had ever known. Sometimes greatness begins quietly, not with applause, but with sweat, struggle, and borrowed microphones in dusty suburban halls. In the late 1952, the Gibb family made a major decision. Life in Manchester had become difficult. Work was hard to find, and the environment was rough. Hugh and Barbara wanted a better chance for their children, and they believed that Australia could offer new opportunities. So the family packed their belongings and traveled across the world to Redcliffe, Queensland. The journey was long, and they had to leave behind the familiar places of their childhood. But they carried their music with them. For Barry, Robin, and Maurice, the move felt like a new beginning. Redcliffe was very different from Manchester. The weather was warm, the air felt open, and the community was smaller. Life moved at a slower pace. The Gibb children settled into this new place and soon returned to what they knew best: singing. They practiced at home, in backyards, and anywhere they could. Barry continued to focus on playing guitar and writing songs. His younger brothers kept improving their harmonies. The bond between them stayed strong, and music remained the center of their relationship. Barry and the twins soon began performing anywhere they found an audience. They sang outside shops, on street corners, and at small community events. Sometimes they performed in local cinemas before movies started. They did not earn much, but these small performances helped them gain confidence. People began to notice the brothers and the unique way their voices blended. Even without professional equipment, their harmonies stood out. Their first real step forward happened when a local radio DJ named Bill Gates heard them. He recognized that these young boys had something special. He supported them and helped introduce them to more people in the community. The group needed a name, and it was Bill Gates who helped bring that about. Their name, Bee Gees, came from the initials BG, which referred both to Barry Gibb and Bill Gates, as well as other local supporters whose last names also began with G. The name stuck, and soon people around Redcliffe started referring to them as the Bee Gees. With help from Bill Gates, the brothers began to get more organized performances. They appeared on local shows and gained a small but loyal following. They also recorded their first songs in Australia. The recordings were simple and produced on low-budget equipment, but they showed Barry's early songwriting talent. Even at a young age, he had a natural sense of how to build melody and emotion into music. The songs might not have been polished, but they had heart, and people responded to them. Barry's role in the group became clear. While Robin and Maurice added harmonies and musical support, Barry had a natural ability to lead. He had the strongest drive to push forward and improve. He was always thinking about new songs, new sounds, and ways the group could grow. The others trusted him, and he began guiding the direction of their music. His leadership was not forced. It came naturally because his vision was strong, and he worked hard to bring it to life. The Bee Gees' early years in Australia were full of learning. They learned how to perform for different audiences, how to handle mistakes, and how to work as a team. They experienced the challenges of small venues, unreliable sound equipment, and limited opportunities. But they also experienced the joy of small successes, like when a crowd applauded or when a local radio show played their song. These experiences strengthened their confidence and motivated them to keep going. The Gibb family supported the brothers completely. Hugh helped manage performances and encouraged their growth. Barbara stayed involved, making sure the boys stayed grounded and focused. The family lived simply, but the support they gave each other made their path feel possible. The Bee Gees were not yet famous, but the foundation for their future success was forming. Local fame in Australia gave the brothers hope. But it also made something clear. If they wanted to reach a larger audience, they needed to go where the global music industry was growing. Many successful artists were beginning to rise in England. British music was gaining attention worldwide. The family started thinking about returning to the UK to pursue bigger opportunities. The idea of going back was both exciting and risky. There was no guarantee of success, but Barry believed in the music they were creating, and he knew that they had something unique. The decision was made. The Bee Gees would return to England to try to make it on a larger stage. This move would take them far beyond street corners and small cinemas. It would take them closer to the world of professional records, international radio, and real competition. But soon, a message, a ship, and a bold return to England would change everything. Fame was calling, and it would not be denied. Fame does not arrive gradually, it arrives like a flood. And the Bee Gees were not prepared for how deep the waters would go. When the Gibb family returned to the United Kingdom in 1967, they were hopeful but uncertain. They had grown in confidence as musicians in Australia, but the music scene in the UK was intense. Many artists were competing for attention, and standing out was difficult. Barry, Robin, and Maurice were young, ambitious, and determined, but they still needed someone who could guide them and help them break into the industry. That guidance came in the form of Robert Stigwood, a music manager and producer with a strong reputation. Stigwood recognized potential in the Bee Gees right away. He listened to their harmonies and original songs and understood that their sound was different from what other groups were offering. He signed them and began shaping their path. Under Stigwood's direction, the Bee Gees began recording new material, and the results showed their talent clearly. One of their first major hits during this time was "To Love Somebody." Barry wrote the song with the idea that it could be sung with strong emotion, and many artists later covered it. But the Places to Huns, Bee Gees' original version, stood out because of the sincerity and raw feeling in Barry's voice. The song became widely recognized and helped introduce the group to audiences beyond the UK. Around the same time, they released Massachusetts. This song carried a gentle, reflective tone and showed the Bee Gees' ability to write music that felt personal and thoughtful. Listeners connected with it, and the song reached the top of different music charts. It was a clear sign that the Bee Gees were becoming a serious presence in the music world. Radio stations played their songs often, and the public began paying attention. As their music gained popularity, the Bee Gees started traveling for performances and promoting their work. They appeared on television shows and began touring internationally. Fans were drawn to their voices, especially the close harmonies that had developed from years of singing together. Their music felt emotional and honest, which made many people feel like they understood the brothers personally. Barry, Robin, and Maurice were no longer just three young men trying to find their place. They were becoming global artists. With this rise, however, also came challenges. Fame brought high expectations. Audiences, record labels, and media all demanded new work, new songs, new performances, and energy that never seemed to stop. Barry began to feel the pressure of being the main songwriter. He wanted to keep the quality of their music high, but the schedule left little time to rest. He was still young, and learning how to handle sudden worldwide attention was difficult. Inside the group, the brothers' relationship remained strong, but fame also created some tension. Each brother had his own personality and musical ideas. Barry, as the oldest, often took the lead and made final decisions. Robin had a powerful voice and a strong creative mind, and sometimes he wanted more space to express his ideas. Maurice played a key role in balancing the two, helping maintain unity. The dynamic was close and loving, but the pressure sometimes made disagreements more emotional. Even so, they remained committed to each other. Their bond had been formed in childhood through shared struggle, shared dreams, and shared music. That connection held them together even when things were not easy. As tours continued, the Bee Gees experienced what it meant to be in the spotlight. Interviews, cameras, long travel schedules, and constant public attention were now normal parts of daily life. People recognized them in public. Crowds waited outside hotels, fans tried to get close at every performance. At first, this attention felt exciting, but Barry soon realized that fame also created distance. The group could not move freely or live privately. Everything they did had to be controlled, and every word could be repeated in newspapers. Barry began to understand that fame had a cost. It changed how people saw them and how they had to behave. Sometimes, the public expected them to always appear confident, cheerful, and ready to perform. But behind the scenes, the brothers were still figuring out their lives. They were dealing with exhaustion, creative pressure, and normal human emotions. Barry, especially, began to feel how heavy it was to be seen as the leader. The music was his passion, but the expectations surrounding it were becoming heavier. Despite these challenges, the Bee Gees continued to produce strong music. Their songwriting developed as they tried new ideas and refined their style. Barry learned how to work efficiently in studios, how to guide arrangements, and how to bring emotion into every recording. Robin continued improving his unique vocal tone, and Maurice strengthened his skills in both performance and music composition. They were growing as artists, while the world watched. The Bee Gees' success during this time laid the foundation for what would later become one of the most significant musical careers in history. Their early hits proved that they were more than a temporary trend. They had talent that could last. Yet, success also placed them on a path that required constant work, constant presence, and constant reinvention. Barry was only beginning to see that fame was not simply about applause and recognition. It also came with pressure, responsibility, and sacrifice. As he watched how quickly the world changed its attention and how difficult it was to maintain balance, he began to understand that staying true to oneself in the music industry required strength. The brothers continued to rise, finding their place on stages around the world. Their voices were heard in homes, on radios, and on television screens in many countries. The dream that began on quiet streets and small local stages was now real, but they were still learning how to live in this new world. But success is only one side of the stage lights. The shadows were beginning to grow behind them. Just when the world thought they knew the Bee Gees, Barry rewrote the sound of an entire generation. By the early 1970s, the Bee Gees' early success had begun to slow down. Tastes in music were changing, and the group was searching for a new direction. Their older style of emotional ballads and soft pop was no longer connecting the same way. Barry, Robin, and Maurice felt the pressure to evolve or risk fading away. Around this time, they decided to move to the United States, eventually settling in Miami, Florida. Miami offered a different environment, a warmer climate, new creative influences, and a fresh start. The move turned out to be one of the most important decisions of their career. Miami had a relaxed atmosphere but also a strong music culture. It gave the brothers space to experiment. They began recording at Criteria Studios, a place where several well-known artists also recorded. Working in a new studio with different musicians and producers helped open their minds to new sounds. They spent long hours trying new rhythms and vocal ideas. Barry, as usual, took the lead in shaping the group's musical direction. It was during these studio sessions that something unexpected happened. One day, while experimenting with different vocal styles, Barry sang in a high, strong falsetto voice. This was not planned. It was simply something he tried in the moment. The reaction from those in the studio was immediate. The sound was sharp, emotional, and memorable. It had a strong presence that stood out. Everyone realized that this falsetto could become a signature sound. Barry began to use the falsetto more often, and soon it became an important part of the Bee Gees' identity. The group started working with producer Arif Mardin, who encouraged them to explore more rhythm-driven music. Their songs began to include strong bass lines, sharper beats, and a more energetic feel. This new direction felt natural. Barry's high vocals combined with Robin and Maurice's harmonies created a rich, layered sound that felt fresh. The Bee Gees were no longer just a pop group. They were moving towards something that would soon reshape music. Around this time, disco music was beginning to grow. It had a focus on rhythm, dance, and strong emotional movement. The Bee Gees' new sound fit perfectly into this style. They recorded songs like Jive Talkin' and Nights on Broadway, which showed their new direction. These songs performed well and brought them back into the public spotlight. But the biggest turning point came when they were asked to help create music for the film Saturday Night Fever. The film producers were looking for songs that captured the energy of young people at nightclubs, dancing, socializing, and experiencing life in a fast, emotional way. The Bee Gees began writing and recording music for the project with this emotion in mind. They did not know that what they were creating would become a cultural phenomenon. Songs like Stayin' Alive, Night, Fever, and How Deep Is Your Love were recorded during this time. Each song had a strong rhythm, heartfelt lyrics, and Barry's falsetto leading the way. When Saturday Night Fever was released, everything changed. The movie became extremely popular. People connected deeply with the story and the music. The soundtrack became one of the best-selling albums of all time. The Bee Gees suddenly were not just successful, they were at the center of a global cultural wave. Their music was everywhere: radio, dance floors, television, and daily conversations. The world associated disco with the Bee Gees. Their sound became the sound of a generation. The success was massive. The Bee Gees topped the Billboard charts over and over. They received multiple Grammy Awards and became one of the most recognized musical groups in the world. Barry's writing skills were praised for their emotional depth and strong structure. His ability to write songs that connected directly with listeners' feelings made him stand out. People did not just dance to Bee Gees music, they felt something when they heard it. Barry also wrote songs for many other artists during this time. He helped create hits for singers like Barbra Streisand, Diana Ross, and Kenny Rogers. These songs also became successful, showing that Barry's talent was not limited to performing. He had a strong sense of how to shape melody, emotion, and sound in a way that could work for many different voices. This period solidified his position as one of the greatest songwriters of his era. His influence was not limited to one group. It spread across the music industry. But success also came with challenges. The attention was constant. The schedules were tight. Fame demanded a lot of energy and emotional strength. The Bee Gees were performing, recording, traveling, and being interviewed all the time. Their lives were no longer private. Barry felt the pressure of being seen not just as a musician, but as a public figure who needed to meet expectations. The rise had been exciting, but the pace was exhausting. As disco continued to grow, it reached a point where some people began to push back against it. Some radio stations stopped playing disco music. Critics began to dismiss the genre, and the Bee Gees became a target for some of that criticism. Even though they had helped create a major musical moment, the reaction began to shift. The public can be quick to raise someone up and just as quick to turn away. Barry and his brothers felt this change. It was confusing to go from being celebrated everywhere to suddenly facing strong criticism from some places. The music had not changed, but the public mood had. Barry realized that fame could be unpredictable. Public approval could rise and fall without warning. Even success could feel unstable. Still, the impact of what the Bee Gees created during this time was undeniable. They shaped the sound of an era. Their songs became part of daily life for millions of people. They influenced styles of singing, dancing, and music production. Barry's falsetto became iconic. The rhythms and harmonies of their music left a lasting impression on the world. This period of reinvention marked a major chapter in Barry Gibb's life. It showed his ability to adapt, evolve, and lead. He did not allow the group to be trapped by their earlier success. He pushed forward, tried new things, and helped create something meaningful and lasting. But the higher the climb, the thinner the air, and something was about to break. Every cultural wave has a crash, and the Bee Gees were about to be buried beneath their own success. After the massive success of Saturday Night Fever and the disco era, the Bee Gees became one of the biggest names in the world. Their music played in clubs, homes, radio stations, and public spaces everywhere. But when a style of music becomes too popular, it often leads to backlash. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the public mood began to shift. Many people felt that disco music had become too common, too commercial, or too connected to certain lifestyle scenes. The disco image started to be mocked, and the Bee Gees, being the most recognizable faces of the genre, were placed directly in the center of the backlash. The shift was not small. In the United States, some radio stations stopped playing disco entirely. There were large public events where people destroyed disco records. The famous Disco Demolition Night in 1979 was one clear example where disco records were blown up in a baseball stadium, and the event turned chaotic. Even though the Bee Gees did not create disco alone, they were the artists most strongly linked to its identity. Because of this, many stations unofficially blacklisted their music. It became difficult for their new songs to receive airplay, even if the songs were not disco. Public criticism came quickly. Television shows and comedians joked about the Bee Gees. Newspapers published headlines implying that their popularity had gone too far. People began treating the group not as respected artists, but as an example of a trend that had been pushed to the limit. The same voices that had once praised them turned cold. Fame had lifted them high, but now the cultural shift pushed them down. The Bee Gees felt the change in every part of their work. For Barry, Robin, and Maurice, the backlash was painful. They had worked hard to write meaningful songs and had taken risks to reinvent themselves. Their success was not an accident. It came from dedication and creativity. Yet now they were being dismissed as if their music had no value. The emotional toll was heavy. The brothers felt misunderstood and cut off from the industry that once welcomed them. It was not only a professional setback, but also a personal one. The group had given so much of their identity to their music, and now the public reaction made them question themselves. Barry especially felt the pressure. He had led many of the creative decisions and songwriting for the group. When praise had come, it felt shared. But when criticism arrived, he felt responsible for the outcome. He wondered whether he had made the right choices. Fame had always come with challenges, but this period made him question his place in the music world. He asked himself what direction he should take next, and whether the world still wanted to hear the Bee Gees at all. Yet, even during this difficult time, the brothers continued to write music. They did not stop creating. They simply shifted their focus. Since the Bee Gees' name was being pushed aside, Barry began writing for other artists again. This allowed him to continue expressing his creativity without facing the same level of public resistance. He wrote and produced hit songs for Barbra Streisand, Dionne Warwick, and others. These songs succeeded, showing that Barry's ability was still strong. The backlash was about public opinion, not talent. The emotional strain, however, was still present. Fame had once brought excitement, joy, and a sense of purpose. Now, it brought isolation and confusion. Barry tried to stay grounded, focusing on his family and personal life. His wife, Linda, provided strong emotional support. She reminded him that the world's opinion changed constantly, but family and personal values stayed steady. Barry held on to this support as he tried to understand how to move forward. At the same time, the relationship between the brothers continued to shift. They supported each other, but the stress made everything heavier. They had shared the rise together, and now they were sharing the fall. Each brother reacted differently to pressure, and sometimes disagreements surfaced. However, the bond they had built since childhood did not break. They stayed connected, even in the hardest moments. Barry also began to think more deeply about identity. For many years, his identity had been tied to public approval and musical achievement. But now, he started asking questions like, who am I outside of fame? What does music mean to me if the world is not cheering? These questions were difficult, but they were also necessary. Barry had to find a way to make music that felt true to him, regardless of whether it brought immediate success. During this time, the Bee Gees slowly began to step back from the spotlight. They did not break up, but they allowed time to pass. They rested, reflected, and waited for the right moment to return. Fame had brought them high, and backlash had brought them low. Now, they needed to regain balance. But while the public turned away, life continued. And just as the world turned their backs, tragedy struck the Gibb family in a way fame could never soften. At the height of chaos, Barry found his anchor not in music, but in a woman who saw the man behind the legend. Before Barry met Linda Gray, he experienced his first marriage to Maureen Bates. They married in 1966, during a time when Barry was still young and trying to understand his life and identity. The Bee Gees were just beginning to find their place in music, and Barry was dealing with the stress of rising fame. Barry and Maureen cared for each other, but the demands of his career made it hard for them to build a stable life together. Barry was traveling, recording, and trying to manage sudden attention. Their relationship did not have the time or space to grow. After 4 years, the marriage ended in 1970. Barry carried lessons from this period. He learned that love required presence, stability, and emotional connection. Not just affection, he understood that a long-lasting relationship needed more than just feelings, it needed balance and mutual support. That same year, Barry met Linda Gray, a young woman who worked as a model and had been crowned Miss Edinburgh. Their meeting was simple, but the connection was clear. Linda was calm, grounded, and genuine. She did not care about fame or the glamorous side of the music world. She cared about Barry as a person. Her presence felt steady at a time when Barry's life was constantly changing. They married on the 1st of September 1970, and from that moment, Linda became one of the most important influences in Barry's life. Their marriage became a source of strength for Barry. While the world saw him as a famous musician, Linda saw him as a husband and a partner. She helped him stay grounded during his highest moments and supported him during his hardest times. Being with Linda allowed Barry to step away from the pressures of fame and feel like himself. He often said that Linda gave him peace and protected him from losing himself in the entertainment industry. Barry and Linda built a family together. They had 5 children: Stephen, Ashley, Travis, Michael, and Alexandra. Raising a family while being a world-famous musician was not easy. Barry often had to travel, record, or perform, but he did his best to stay connected to his children's lives. Linda made sure their home remained stable, loving, and supportive, even when the outside world felt demanding. Their home life reminded Barry of what truly mattered. No matter how the music industry changed, he always had a place where he felt safe. Linda's loyalty to Barry was constant. She stood with him during success, when the world praised him, and during backlash, when the world criticized him. She did not leave when things got difficult. She stayed. Her support did not depend on public opinion, wealth, or status. It came from commitment and love. Barry respected and valued this deeply. He often spoke about how Linda kept him emotionally strong. He credited her with helping him avoid many of the destructive patterns that fame can bring, such as addiction or emotional collapse. While many artists struggled to handle fame, Barry had a partner who made sure he never faced those pressures alone. Their marriage lasted for decades, a rare achievement in the entertainment industry. They created a home built on trust, patience, and understanding. Barry once said that he knew he could have lost himself many times throughout his career, but Linda was the reason he remained grounded. She reminded him of who he was before fame and who he still was underneath the public image. Even as Barry faced professional challenges, Linda continued to be his foundation. She encouraged him to keep writing, keep performing, and keep believing in his talent even when the world changed its opinions. Their relationship was not dramatic. It was steady, consistent, and built on real love. But even the strongest love could not protect Barry from the losses that were coming. Fame can give you everything except the power to stop time. The Gibb family had always been close, connected not only through blood, but through music. The bond between Barry, Robin, Maurice, and their younger brother Andy was built from childhood, when they sang together in the living room and dreamed about performing for the world. As the years passed and success came, they continued to support one another. But life does not protect even the closest families from hardship. The losses that Barry would face over the years would leave a lasting mark on his heart. Andy Gibb was the youngest of the brothers, born long after Barry, Robin, and Maurice. Andy grew up watching his older brothers rise to fame. He admired them and wanted to follow in their footsteps. He had a strong voice, charm, and natural stage presence. When he began his own music career, success came quickly. Songs like "I Just Want to Be Your Everything" and "Shadow Dancing" reached the top of the charts. Andy became a teen idol, known for his looks and emotional voice. However, the pressure of fame came faster than he could manage. He struggled with emotional stress and personal difficulties. His life became harder to control, and he faced challenges with substance use and depression. Barry tried many times to guide him. He helped Andy with music, brought him into the studio, and supported him as a brother. Maurice and Robin also tried to help in their own ways. The family wanted Andy to recover and live a healthy life. But the pressures were strong, and Andy found it difficult to escape the cycle he was caught in. On the 10th of March 1988, Andy Gibb passed away at the age of just 30. His death was related to years of strain on his body and emotional health, even though the official cause was heart failure. Andy's death affected Barry deeply. He felt pain and sadness, but he also felt guilt. He wondered whether he could have done more, whether he missed a moment when he could have changed the path. Losing a younger sibling, while still young himself, left a heavy emotional mark on him. The family mourned together, but each brother carried the loss differently. For Barry, it was the beginning of learning how to live with grief. Life continued, and the Bee Gees moved forward. They continued to write and perform, adapting again to new music changes. Their bond remained strong. Barry continued to work closely with his twin brothers, Robin and Maurice. Maurice, the easygoing brother, often acted as the calm one between Barry and Robin. He played multiple instruments and brought a grounding energy to the group. Robin, with his emotional and recognizable voice, carried deep expression in his singing. The three brothers supported one another in music and in daily life. They shared memories of childhood, of early dreams, and of the rise to success. But in January 2003, tragedy came again. Maurice Gibb suddenly fell ill due to complications from intestinal surgery. His passing was unexpected and shocking. Barry and Robin were left to process another devastating loss. Maurice had always been the stabilizing force between them. Without him, the dynamic between Barry and Robin changed. Barry felt like a piece of his foundation had been taken away. Losing Maurice was not only the loss of a brother, it was the loss of part of the musical glue that held the Bee Gees together. Barry struggled deeply after Maurice's death. He found it hard to write or perform. The idea of making music without Maurice felt painful. The brothers had spent their entire lives sharing the stage, the studio, and the emotional experience of creating together. Now one voice, one presence, one part of their shared identity was gone. Barry retreated from the spotlight for a while, needing time to grieve. Eventually, Barry and Robin did return to making music, but it was different. They continued performing at times and honored Maurice through their work. The loss had changed them, and the world could feel it. Music was still a way of expressing emotion, but grief was always present beneath the melodies. Then, in 2012, another loss arrived. Robin Gibb had been battling illness for some time. He fought bravely, continuing to work and perform when he could, but his condition grew worse. On May 20, 2012, Robin passed away. Barry had now lost 3 brothers, Andy, Maurice, and Robin. The group that had begun in childhood, on street corners and small stages, had now become only Barry. The voices that once blended together into one sound were now memories. The emotional weight of this loss was almost more than Barry could process. He had spent nearly his entire life creating music with his brothers. The Bee Gees were not just a band, they were family, identity, and history. Without them, Barry had to face life from a different place. He felt grief, loneliness, and survivor's guilt. He questioned why he was the one who remained. He wondered whether there was still music left in him. Yet, even in this difficult time, Barry found a kind of quiet strength. When he performed alone after their passing, he often said he felt his brothers with him. Not physically, but emotionally. When he sang songs they wrote together, he could still hear their voices in his mind. The harmonies they created remained inside him. On stage, he sometimes looked upward or paused, as if acknowledging their presence. Music allowed him to feel close to them again, even though they were gone. Barry learned to carry grief alongside gratitude. He remembered the laughter, the shared work, the late-night writing sessions, and the bond that no one else could understand. He also remembered the challenges, the disagreements, and the difficult times. But above everything, he remembered the love and connection that had shaped their lives. The losses changed Barry forever. They made him reflect on what really mattered. Fame had brought success, attention, and influence, but it could not protect him from pain. The world saw the Bee Gees as global icons, but Barry saw them as brothers who shared childhood dreams and stood together through everything. And yet, even in grief, Barry discovered that the story of his music and his heart was not finished. The world remembers the Bee Gees, but Barry remembers the boy who just wanted to sing. After losing his brothers, Barry faced a new phase of life. The Bee Gees had been active for decades, but now he had to decide what music meant to him without the group. He took time to process his loss, to be with his family, and to understand who he was outside of the trio. Music had always been his voice, but now the sound of it carried memory and emotion in a different way. Instead of trying to replace what was gone, Barry chose to honor it. When Barry began making music again, he focused on projects that felt personal and meaningful. One of these was his solo album, In the Now, released in 2016. The songs on the album reflected experience, maturity, and reflection. They were not trying to repeat past success or chase trends. Instead, they expressed the thoughts of someone who had lived through joy, fame, heartbreak, and loss. Barry worked with his sons, Stephen and Ashley, to create the music. This allowed him to continue the family bond that had always been part of his musical life. The album received respect for being sincere and honest. It showed that Barry still had a strong voice and emotional depth. Barry also continued to honor his brothers through performances and tributes. There were concerts where he sang Bee Gees songs alone, and the audience could feel the weight of memory in every note. He shared stories about the writing of certain songs and how the brothers worked together. People did not only see a performer, they saw someone remembering, someone carrying the past with love. These performances helped many fans reconnect with their own memories tied to Bee Gees music. Over time, Barry received recognition for his lifelong contribution to music. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Songwriters Hall of Fame. In 2018, he was knighted by Queen Elizabeth II for his services to music and charity. Barry accepted these honors with gratitude, but also with humility. He did not talk about them in terms of status. Instead, he saw them as acknowledgments of a journey he shared with his brothers. To him, every award was linked to Robin, Maurice, and Andy. He often said that without them, there would be no Bee Gees and no legacy. As Barry grew older, he became more open about the meaning of music in his life. He spoke about how writing and singing had always been a way of expressing emotion when words alone were not enough. He explained that music allowed him to share parts of himself that were private and often difficult to talk about. Aging, for Barry, did not mean letting go of music. It meant understanding it more deeply. He realized that songs were not just entertainment, they were memories, feelings, and moments, frozen in time. When people listened to Bee Gees songs, they were not just listening to melodies. They were remembering periods in their lives, relationships, joys, and losses. Barry also reflected on how the music industry changed over the years. He saw the shift from live instruments to digital production, from albums to streaming platforms, from long-term artistry to fast trends. He did not criticize the new world of music, but he often emphasized the value of songwriting and emotional authenticity. To him, a good song still needed heart. He believed that even in a changing industry, the connection between artist and listener would always matter most. He encouraged younger musicians to focus on honesty in their music, rather than trying to fit into trends. Barry's view of legacy became simple. He did not want to be remembered only as a star or a cultural icon. He wanted to be remembered as someone who cared about music, family, and love. He believed that the most lasting legacy was the emotional impact left behind. If a song made someone feel understood, comforted, or happy, then the work was meaningful. For Barry, the legacy of the Bee Gees was not only in records or charts, it was in the way their music helped people during personal moments in life. Despite everything he experienced, Barry remained gentle and thoughtful in how he spoke about his past. He carried grief, but he also carried warmth. He often described his brothers not only as musicians, but as companions who shared a lifelong journey. Even though they were gone, they continued to live in his voice, his music, and his memories. Barry's story is not only the story of rise and fame, it is also the story of resilience, adaptation, loss, and love. It is the story of someone who devoted his life to music and continued forward even when the world around him changed. But there was one person whose influence Barry had never spoken fully about, until now. It wasn't rivalry, it wasn't competition, it was something far rarer: respect that endured when fame did not. Barry Gibb and Cliff Richard first crossed paths in the early years of the Bee Gees' rise. Cliff was already a major figure in British music. He had experienced fame before the Bee Gees were known outside small venues. For Barry, seeing someone handle fame with calmness and dignity was important. At a time when many artists were caught in the fast lifestyle of the industry, Cliff stood out. He carried himself with a steady, controlled presence. He did not let fame shape his identity. Instead, he stayed close to his values. This had a real effect on Barry. Barry had seen how fame could change people. He had seen how fast attention could go to someone's head. But Cliff did not change. He treated people kindly and did not act above anyone. Barry respected that. It gave him an example of how to handle success without losing himself. Cliff showed that it was possible to be famous and still grounded. He showed that public image did not have to control personal truth. This helped Barry understand that a career could last longer when built on character, not image. Over the years, Their paths moved in different directions. The Bee Gees became global icons during the disco era, and Cliff continued releasing hit songs and touring steadily. They were not always in the same place, and they did not spend constant time together, but the respect between them remained. The music industry changes quickly, and friendships in it often fade. But the connection between Barry and Cliff was not based on business or convenience. It was based on admiration and shared understanding. Cliff's consistency stood out to Barry in another way. Cliff kept his faith strong throughout his career. He did not hide it or change it to fit trends. Even when the entertainment world questioned him or made jokes, he did not shift his beliefs. Barry admired how Cliff remained true to himself in a world where many people tried to reshape themselves to stay relevant. Cliff stayed the same person privately and publicly. Barry knew how rare that was. Fame can pull a person in many directions, but Cliff did not let it. As Barry watched musicians rise and fall, break down, or lose themselves, Cliff represented stability. He showed that fame does not have to destroy a person's identity. Barry himself had seen the effects of fame closely. He had watched Andy struggle under pressure. He had lived through the intense rise and collapse of the disco era. He had felt the loneliness that came with fame's expectations. And he had lost Maurice and Robin, whose lives were deeply connected to music and fame. Because of these experiences, Barry understood how fragile a life in music could be. This created a quiet bond between Barry and Cliff. They were two men who had survived decades in an industry known for emotional strain. They both experienced the highs of massive success and the lows of criticism and loss. They had both seen friends and fellow artists go too soon. They understood that being a public figure did not protect someone from real life. Behind the smiles, interviews, and performances, there were private struggles, private fears, and private grief. Their bond was not loud. They did not announce it or display it for publicity. It existed in shared looks backstage, calm conversations, and small moments of understanding. When they met, the respect was clear. They did not need to impress each other. They already knew what the other had faced to still be standing. Barry once said that what he admired most about Cliff was that he never let the music industry change who he was. Cliff did not chase trends. He made music that felt true to him. This inspired Barry to do the same in his later years. After losing his brothers, Barry focused even more on what was real to him: family, honest music, and personal peace. Cliff's influence helped him find this clarity. To Barry, Cliff represented more than a fellow musician. He represented a path, a way of surviving a long life in the music world without losing your core. Cliff showed that it was possible to stay gentle in a business that can be harsh. He showed that strength does not always have to be loud. It can be calm, patient, and steady. Their relationship was not dramatic, but it was meaningful. It was built on shared respect, quiet understanding, and the knowledge of what it costs to stay true to yourself when the world is watching. And what Barry says next will change how you see both men forever.